Well, Mr. Peters, if I could begin firstly, I've just had a quick look at your statement. The pressing issue of the Chinese naval ships in the Tasman Sea, how was that raised with China? What assurances did you seek about what they are doing there?
Well, from the first meeting we had when we arrived, we set out that if you've got a relationship of cooperation and friendship, there will be differences, and it is understandable that they need to be raised, and raise them we did. We mentioned the recent event with respect to the naval exercises from China, and the irony of the use of naval weaponry in the Taiwan situation just in the last 24 hours, and talk to them about the lack of notice that you'd expect for a country like ours in a relationship with China to have had.
Did they give you any assurances about what they're doing in the Tasman?
Well, we didn't inquire into that in terms of their law of the sea right to be there. The question was the lack of notice and our concern about that, particularly when you've got to move civil aviation flights to another pattern because of that, and emphasise to them that we would have expected to be notified a long time earlier than that.
Was there any capacity for a future agreement where there could be better warning? If they are to have an increased presence in that area, did they give you an assurance that they would provide better warnings of any exercises?
Well, we placed on record our concern and the expectation that we'll have a better warning in the future.
Can you give us any sense of their response, Mr. Wang's response? Was he at all open to this idea, or was he just very firmly saying that China was in the right?
I think it'd be true to say that he took our concerns on board in the discussions. It is not the way of the Chinese government to give you an automatic answer, because in their system they would consult before they did that, and that's what we fully expected.
Do they think that New Zealand and Australia have been overhyping this? I think that was the term used earlier by one of their officials. Was there any concern expressed that New Zealand was overreacting?
Well, we placed it in the context of, look, we've had this special relationship, which has first begun in 2008 and expanded upon. We're in our second decade of this arrangement, and this is a failure in it at this time, and we'd like to have it corrected into the future.
What exactly is the failure?
The failure to give us adequate notice.
So New Zealand is prepared to live with China having a more increased presence in the Tasman Sea, close to our both Australia and New Zealand, if they provide better warnings?
Look, there's always been concerns which we have always raised under UNCLOS, the law of the sea, and other theatres in the world where China is concerned, and we rightly understand their placement here under the law of the sea. That said, it is for two countries with a serious partnership and arrangement that we would have expected to have notice. That is what we said, and that is something which we believe is under consideration.
Just finally on that, they are considering that notice issue? Well,
that's our expectation, yes.
Can you just speak maybe in the bigger context about the presence of the Chinese ships in the region and the live fire exercises? How does New Zealand kind of look at that situation and the evolving security situation, I guess, in the region?
Well, we did raise the issue that we were in French Polynesia not so many months ago when a missile landed on the very edges of French Polynesia, where most Pacific island nations got no warning at all, and we got little warning. And this was the same context. So we were just asking, what is the purpose of this here?
On the issue of the Cook Islands, do you feel that China fully appreciates the status that the realm nations have? You've raised that in your opening remarks. Were they receptive to that?
Well, we made it very, very clear that their misunderstanding that this was a tripartite three-country arrangement was not correct. That we were in this unique arrangement that is a realm country with constitutional ties deriving from our original arrangements all those years ago, at the time of independence, and in particular in 2001 under Helen Clark, and that's what we were standing by, and that we believed that they needed more information coming from the embassy in Wellington as to the nature of the special arrangement, but that there was an irony about this. They were misconstruing, and they need to understand the constitutional arrangement, which they said they did now. And the second thing, we did say that we got more information out of China on those deals than we ever got out of the Cook Islands. This was an irony not lost on them.
Well, you'll be aware that Mark Brown has been making critical statements about New Zealand, and in fact yourself, I think, about the reset in Parliament over the last 24 hours. Your response to that, because he says you've been treating New Zealand's been treating the Cooks like children.
Look, on the constitutional arrangement which we are talking about, we had to remind in a press statement them of the constitutional arrangements that go back in our sense, and so for the Cook Islands government as well, to the Bill of Rights 1688, that no one will question the right of free speech in a parliament. And that's what I said today in my press statement, and that's where it rests. Other than we did remind them of what you might call the dictum of a true democracy.
So you're saying you learnt more about the agreements from China than you did from the Cook Islands. What did you learn? For example, do we know any more about the intentions around ports and infrastructure with this blue economy agreement?
Well, look, we learned at the very beginning that there were agreements, not one, a number. We learned all that from China. So we had to be frank with them that we were facing this irony of this country that we'd worked so closely with as part of our realm connection, and the issue of non-disclosure. But as for what someone says in the Cook Islands Parliament, I have no intention of breaching the Bill of Rights 1688 by challenging that. However, if it was inside a parliament and it was out on the street or at a hall, that's different.
At this stage, are you more comfortable with the agreements than you were when they initially came out? Have you had time to look them over a bit? And what's the general feeling about them at this stage?
Well, we have not had time to look at them dimensionally, or more importantly, the Cook Island people have no comprehension of what that dimensionally means as well. And our responsibility, constitutionally, is directly to the Cook Islands people, not just in Cook Islands, but that diaspora that is in New Zealand and Australia in particular. And we've tried to emphasise that in this context. We are answerable to the New Zealand people as well, and New Zealand Parliament. And if we cannot respond in Parliament with knowledge, then how good is our information, how good is our arrangement, and how good is the special points of priority that was signed by Prime Minister Dr. Moate and Helen Clark for New Zealand in 2001, which is what we have been sticking to all these years.
I have two questions. So back to the live fire drills. Do you know if the Chinese had a nuclear submarine with their ship formation? And secondly, what were the specifics of the trade deals that you discussed with China this time?
On the question of the presence or otherwise of a nuclear or any submarine, we have I have no knowledge of that. I have had no confirmation from back home that that is the case. On the second thing, we just said that we were going to work on a range of things, expanding our trade relationship going forward, and some of the things we need to prioritise with speed in the interest of both of us.
Can you go into specifics of which areas these agreements were in?
Well, they even went too far as science, AI, or the whole range of things. It was quite comprehensive in terms of the headings. But as you know, under those headings are thousands of opportunities, which is precisely what he said. There are thousands of opportunities we can work on.
Did China indicate at all as to whether they would continue to operate in the Tasman Sea that far south in future?
No, I didn't have that indication. I did ask whether the military hardware operated differently in the southern hemisphere than the northern hemisphere, and as to whether that was the purpose of their visit here into the Tasman Sea.
Let me just ask, I'm from the Associated Press from the U.S., so I have to ask the Trump question. How did sort of the change in the American administration, how did it play into the talks you had today in any way? Did it play in and come up as a factor, or a factor in New Zealand's thinking as it thinks about its relationship with China?
Well, to be frank, probably more than we thought, excepting I think we both agreed, or our teams agreed, that put aside the controversy of statements and all sorts of media reports, perhaps we should just wait and see what happens when the dust settles.
Can you elaborate a bit on more than we thought? You didn't expect it to come up as much, but it did, and in what way?
Oh, well, because we had a pretty extensive program of subjects to discuss, and so you sort of walk in there with imaginary timelines, compartmentalized to this and this and this. Yeah, but it was interesting, and also, we talked about Ukraine, dare I say it, Gaza, what their thoughts were on those areas. So it was a pretty comprehensive discussion.
Did China raise any concerns with New Zealand about possibly joining Pillar 2 of the AUKUS agreement?
I can frankly say they did not raise the AUKUS Pillar 2 or any of those issues at all.
They're comfortable with our defence arrangements, they don't have any issues?
Well, no, I can't make that conclusion, but he did not raise those issues, and no one's raised those issues with me in the serious discussions we've had here.
Just back to the ships issue, did New Zealand explicitly ask China to stop coming into the Tasman Sea or coming that far south?
No, we wouldn't have been in a position to do that because we had no time did we have their travel plan. So we wouldn't have done that.
But in future, have you asked them to stop doing it?
Well, you're talking about a discussion that I've got to have with all my colleagues and, dare I say it, others. And it'd be wrong of me to give you an answer before those consultations.
But could we even tell them to stop doing it, I guess would be my question too.
Well, now, you're asking for a hypothetical, which I'm not prepared to answer because we have had, as I said, some serious discussions here about our concerns as to what it means. But that is something for a future time.
I mean, Mr. Peters, you've been a foreign minister for many, many years. So has your counterpart. How serious is this issue of these ships coming into an area this far south? We've had it described as unusual, but for someone as experienced as you, have you had to encounter something this difficult?
Well, in terms of the two examples we've got, the firing of a missile with very limited notice to us into the South Pacific and no notice to many Pacific Islands countries, yes, it was a matter of concern and we expressed it very clearly. And then we said on this occasion as well, here we were with literally no notice at all, having by telephone conversation to civil authorities a warning when between our two countries who've got this comprehensive partnership, that should have been advised to us. We made it very clear.
Has it damaged Has this damaged the relationship between New Zealand and China?
Look, I've made it very clear in the beginnings of all our discussions here that we have got concerns and countries that have a decent relationship will understand that sometimes when things go wrong, it is the quality of that relationship that enables one or other of the parties to raise them frankly. And that's what we exactly did.
Can you, going back to the Cook Islands, can you elaborate a little bit on your thoughts about how the relationship might evolve between New Zealand and Cook Islands going forward, the kind of ways you think might improve, or if it needs to change, and how, I guess is how it is.
Well, to give you a brief, comprehensive answer, yes, I do, and it will be with the Cook Islands people to whom we have the responsibility.
And can you give us any ideas on what you're thinking?
Yes, I'm going to consult with the Cook Islands people and find out what they want. That's what I'm obligated to under our Constitution. That's what I'm obligated to do to our Parliament. And above all, it's what I'm obligated to do to the New Zealand taxpayer all over the country who are critically part of our foreign policy aid program.
Just-
last question.
Just Mr. Peters, I don't have the pleasure of going to Mongolia with you, I'm afraid, but I will see you in Korea, and I just wondered if, just a quick comment on what your expectation about the visit to Korea is. There'll be people in New Zealand wondering whether you would take this opportunity to perhaps resurrect a Cook Strait ferry deal, or at least talk to Hyundai, or is that part of the mission? What is the goal here?
Well, first of all, we're going to Mongolia, and it's probably a level of our sort of commitment when we can. We've had a 50-year relationship with them. It's very special for them. They've asked us to come, and we thought, despite it's winter time and it's going to be freezing for us, we're going to do it. And then, having got this far, we need it taken because we haven't had a chance to go to Korea. Do it now, so that we've had extensive 2024 visitations to all the Pacific virtually. And we've done seriously much of Asia, Southeast Asia, and that's part of our program. So we thought we'd get that off before we went home. Because, as you know, if you're flying out of New Zealand, it's 11 hours to Korea in the first place. So let's do it on the way home and bite off as much as we can chew.
Any ferries, and any new ship ferries in the pipeline?
Any what?
Any ships, as in no resurrecting the ferry deal?
We will give you the comprehensive answer to that by the end of March.